welcome. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. This will be the start of what I hope is going to be a series where I do a summary of each of the episodes of the new House of the Dragon HBO series. Disclaimer, this will not be a thorough rundown of all the very important details. It's not going to be super cohesive. This is mainly a summary. So back when Game of Thrones was on, my friend wasn't into watching Game of Thrones, but she really enjoyed it when I would come in and explain the plot of each of the episodes. Probably because how I explain things is a little bit chaotic, a little bit all over the place, but slightly entertaining, I hope. So this is mostly for her, because I don't know if she's going to watch the new season, but it might be fun. And also, since the next series isn't going to come out for like 2 years, it might be useful to at least some people. So disclaimer, if you're looking for a proper rundown, this is probably not going to be the best place for it. There's probably going to be a lot of rambling. If I look down, it's because I've got some notes that I am reading from, and here I don't really like to edit, so if there's pauses, if I start to go off on tangents, I like to just keep it honest and sort of show how I am as an uncut person, as it were. So let's get started. Episode 1, House of the Dragon. This one is, well, so here's a bit of background. They wanted to make a series of the Dance of the Dragons, and they were like, okay, so this is the year of when the Dance of the Dragon starts, and they were like, this is what we want to do. And George was like, you cannot do this. You need like this 10-15 years of lead up, because there's so much sort of background politics that you need to know to be able to understand the character influences and why they did what they did, and why people hate each other, why certain things went the way they went. So there's a lot that happens in these 10 episodes. There are a lot of time skips, because there's a lot of just sort of people living until it gets to a certain boiling point. So that is why this might be quite jam-packed. So first things first, Jaehaerys has been the king. He was king for a lot of years, and due to unfortunate circumstances, all of his sons and heirs died before he died, and so there wasn't a clear line of succession. So he called a council of, like, I think it was 101 people, and they looked at all the claims, and they were like, okay, so you've either got a man, Viserys, or you've got Princess Rhaenys, who is the elder of the claimants, but she is a woman, and back in those days, they didn't like women. And they had never had a woman ruler, and so in the end, this council decided it was going to be Viserys. Viserys was married already. He already had a child on the way. His wife was pregnant, so it was like, okay. I mean, Rhaenys also had a son, so that was part of the contention. Okay, so this is, in terms of Game of Thrones history, this is 172 years before Daenerys and that sort of history. So it's quite a lot. And it's just a lot of things that pop up that influence the future. So that was decided, and now we've got 7 years later, well, not 7 years later, 7 years into Viserys's reign. So Jaehaerys has died, 7 years, Viserys. You've got the main characters who are King Viserys, his wife Aemma. You've got their daughter Rhaenyra. You've also got Viserys's brother Daemon. You've got the Hand of the King, Otto Hightower, and his daughter Alicent. You've got Rhaenys's husband Corlys. And I think that's the main sort of people. And the first episode is a lot of like characters, and I will try and sort of explain each one and sort of why they're important. Okay, so Rhaenyra, she loves dragon riding. The first sort of one of the first shots is her on dragonback going over King's Landing. It's very nostalgic for anyone who's sort of seen the Game of Thrones series. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of here's the courtyard, here's the stairwell, and it's it's just I love those. And it's also the slight differences in the decor, and I love that. So Rhaenyra, she comes off dragonback. She's had a good fun time riding her dragon. She goes to meet Alicent. They are friends. Rhaenyra's like, oh, soon I'll be able to take you flying. They're obviously very close, but Alicent's like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to ride the dragon. And so they go back to the keep, and go to see Rhaenyra's mother, who is currently pregnant. And everyone's hoping for a boy, because this boy will be the new heir. At the moment, the heir is Daemon Targaryen. They're all Targaryens. So the current heir is Daemon Targaryen, King Viserys' brother. This son, hopefully, will be the new heir. She's Aemma, the mother. She's not having a good childbirth, but they're all hoping, you know, for a boy. So after we've gone to see her, it's the small council meeting. This is where we get like small details. Rhaenyra is the cupbearer, so she's sort of around whilst they're discussing all the politics. She sort of knows what's going on. Corlys Velaryon. Oh, for goodness sakes. Corlys Velaryon, husband of Rhaenys, he is worried about this crab feeder. He has been on the shores of one of the sort of places near where his sort of bit of land is, and he's like, we should sort of quell this rebellion. They're getting too out of hand. They are making it dangerous for the ships. But Viserys is like, we don't really want to fight these guys because we don't really want to be in a war. He's very anti-war. He doesn't want to get into a lot of fights. So that's one thing. Otto Hightower, Hand of the King. He's not really important at the moment. He mentions his dislike of Daemon Targaryen. So Daemon Targaryen is known as the Rogue Prince. So he is commander of the City Watch. He has previously had many different sort of roles. He was like treasurer and something else. And that's sort of been taken off of him a couple of times. So his new role, leader of the City Watch, they're like hoping that this one will sort of stick, but Otto is of the opinion that, you know, he should sort of be out of the city and just stay far away. So Daemon has sort of been away, he's come back, but he has secretly come back. So after the small council meeting, Rhaenyra sort of gets told that her uncle has come back, and he's in the throne room. And so she goes to see him, he's sitting on the Iron Throne, and the guard's like, oh dear, that's not allowed, and Rhaenyra's like, oh, it's fine. But it sort of shows his character as a bit of a wild card. So she goes to see him. So it's gonna sound weird to like outsiders, but this is where there's the sexual tension between the two of them sort of starts to show. So he has been on his travels and he has come back with a Valyrian steel necklace for Rhaenyra, which is the same material that his sword is made out of. And they're like, oh look, he's like, oh look, we've both got a piece of our history now. We both have something made of Valyrian steel. Now what's really interesting is he puts the necklace on her, and then she actually, if you watch the necklace, the times where she's wearing it and then not wearing it and then wearing it again, it's a very small hint where you can see sort of where her emotions are at. So sexual tension, they're talking about, you know, he's heir, and she's like, oh yeah, but if my father has a son, then he'll be the heir. And you can see that he's not very happy about that. He kind of likes his position. The next scene is Rhaenyra and Alicent sort of under the Godwood tree that they have in King's Landing. They have like the tree with the creepy face. And they're having a nice afternoon sitting, reading. Alicent's very like studious. She wants Rhaenyra to take it seriously, read the book, all that. And Rhaenyra's making jokes. Since why can't you, you know, pay attention? And then she shows that she actually does know what she's talking about. And Alicent needs to lighten up a bit. And then Rhaenyra takes out one of the pages from the book for Alicent to keep, to sort of remind her of that friendship moment. And also it's about a past sort of piece of history where Nymeria burnt her ships to show that the fighting was done, there's peace, we're not going to fight anymore. It was like a show of peace, we don't have to do this. And she gives that to Alicent to remind her of that, and that's important for later. The next couple of things are like little bits. So Viserys gets cut by the throne, and he's got cuts on his back and they're not healing, and you can see the maesters are kind of worried about that, and they're like, oh, you know, superstition, if the throne cuts you, then you're not really made to rule. But you know, it's a pointy chair. The next bit is the dream. So Viserys has had this dream that someone will be born of the Targaryen line that will be wearing Aegon's crown, sitting on the iron chair on the Iron Throne, and this is important, and there has to be this Targaryen sitting, or, you know, the world's gonna be destroyed. Okay. Now the next bit is where it takes a turn. So the beginning bit's all like nice and happy, and everyone's having a good time, and everyone's getting along. And you get like establishing character moments. And this is where we get Daemon's big establishing character moment. He is the commander of the City Watch. This is the creation of the Gold Cloaks. And it's like, okay, you have been chosen to defend the city. And so that's what they do. They go out into the city. And it is brutal. It's a brutal scene. So it's like, thieves get their hands chopped off. There's 3 of them. What is it? Thieves get their hands chopped off. Rapists get their chopped off. And I can't remember the other one. But it's brutal. You know, carts full of bodies and body parts, kind of brutal. So we got that. Daemon is there with the Gold Cloak, sort of giving out the punishments, like, and the judgments. It's like, you are a thief, therefore punishment. It's brutal. The next scene is the small council meeting, and Daemon has been excluded. Well, Daemon is there, but Otto didn't know he was going to be there, so he was talking to Viserys whilst they were walking in, like, oh, Daemon's gone too far, Daemon shouldn't do this, he's a bit of a nuisance. They walk in, Daemon's there, and he's like, hi, I heard the whole thing you were saying. So it's like, ooh, tension. So we know that Otto doesn't like Daemon. Lord Corlys Velaryon is in support of him. It's like, oh, the city's gone soft, we should be showing strength if we're going to be having a tournament, because they're having a tournament for the birth of the new heir that should be arriving any time soon. Then the city needs to be safe. We can't have thieves and people who are going to harm the citizens of the city, or tourists that are coming in to watch the tournament. So it's a very much a for and against. And then there was an offhand comment that, you know, Daemon should just go back to his wife in the Vale. Next scene is Daemon visiting a whorehouse. He's worried about his position. He's got this favourite sort of whore, Mysaris, or the White Worm. She's important, so it's sort of like a, here's this important character, remember her for later. She's very much a consoler of his feelings. He's worried about the new heir. She's like, don't worry, there's a tournament, you can show your skills, you're still important, all that jazz. So next we have the tournament. So you've got this box where all the important people sit. You've got like Viserys, Alicent and Rhaenyra. You've got Corlys and Rhaenys. A couple of comments were made about Rhaenys being the queen that never was. So it's like, oh, she could have been queen, but she wasn't. And she's fine about it. She's very much, it could have happened, but it, you know, it didn't. Whereas Corlys, her husband's like, you should have been queen, you were robbed. You can sort of see that he's of that opinion. So at the time that the tournament starts, Aemma goes into labour, and it's like, oh, that's good, because the tournament was for the birth. They wanted the birth to happen at the same time. So she goes into labor, and we get a couple of extra things that happen. So, first things first, new character arrives, Sir Criston. He knocks quite a few people off their horses. He seems to be quite the good fighter. And that will come up later. We've got more Rhaenyra and Alicent bonding moments where they're talking about all the different knights. Daemon shows up. He picks Otto's firstborn son to fight against first, and promptly knocks him off his horse just to be like well, screw you, Otto, I'm just gonna hit your son right in, right in the face. However, it takes a turn for the worst. So there's split scenes between the tournament and the birth. Viserys gets called to the birthing room. Turns out the baby is breech, which means it's upside down. It's not coming out. Back in those days, there was literally nothing you could do. So the Maesters are like, they are both going to die, or you have to choose to kill your wife by doing a C-section, and taking the baby out and then hoping the baby lives. So it's kill both of them by doing nothing, or kill one of them to save the other one. Either way, she will die. There's nothing you can do about it. So, because he wants an heir, he's like, okay, we're gonna do the C-section. The C-section is brutal. Probably more brutal than the dismemberments from the City Watch. And then in the tournament, I think it's Sir Criston and Daemon now get a chance to fight. Or someone else gets the chance to fight. Either way, a couple of people fight. I think two random characters get into a bit of an argument, and there's a bit of the head, a bit of bashing in of the brains. So, usually it's like, oh, bloody scenes on the battlefield, that's fine. But a bloody birthing scene, oh, you can't see that. But they really went to town with it. It's like, here are two very intense bloody scenes. Why can't we see both of them? And that's fair. But she dies. And the son, it's a son. The son is here. And Viserys is like, oh, I have my son, but at what cost? Because, he actually liked his wife. He loved her, and she was like everything to him. In the tournament, a couple of people got hacked. And then this is when Daemon and Sir Criston fight. And then Rhaenyra, Sir Criston asks for Rhaenyra's sort of favour. It's like this wreath of flowers. And then he asks it from her and she gives it to him. It's sort of like a, I don't think you can refuse kind of thing. Which means Daemon asks for Alicent's favour. Again, to spite her father. Because they just don't like each other. The next scene is the funeral of Aemma. It turns out the son, the baby, died as well. So they've got a big funeral pyre for her, small funeral pyre next to it for him. There's a really touching moment between Daemon and Rhaenyra because in Targaryen tradition, it's like the dragon lights the fire. So being the daughter, Rhaenyra has to give the command for the dragon to set the fire. But she's obviously lost her mother, and her would-be brother. So she's upset, but obviously her father can't do it. So there's a touching moment between Daemon and Rhaenyra where he's like, he still has you, you have to be strong for him, stuff like that. And so she gets to light the fire. But she's also upset because she said she will never be a son. And it's like, he's lost everything. I can't give that to him. But she still sort of comes for this moment. She's like, okay, I can do this. The next meeting is the small council meeting. Again, they're talking about the heir. What they don't know, Daemon's sort of listening in. On the small council meeting, they're talking about how Daemon is too volatile. What he did with the City Watch shows that he cannot be the heir. It would be detrimental to the rule of the Targaryens. They don't want another Maegor the Cruel. So Maegor the Cruel was one of the past kings who was just not a great guy. He was just the worst. I think he was the one where he actually got stabbed by the throne. He just fell over and was just stabbed right through the chest or something. So they suggest Rhaenyra be the heir instead, because Viserys doesn't have a wife anymore. He can't have any more heirs unless he gets married, and they're like, well, we don't know when that's going to be, so we should probably name someone in the meantime. So yeah. Daemon goes to the whorehouse once again. He has a party with the guards of the City Watch where they're all getting drunk. There's naked ladies all around. And he gives a speech. And then in his speech, he says, he raises a toast for the heir for a day, which is the king's son who literally just died. And it's like, well, he's upset because he's just heard his brother and the small council talking about, you know, outing him as the heir. And so he's slightly upset, a bit annoyed, but he probably shouldn't have said that in front of so many witnesses. So obviously that's not very good. And so then Daemon and Viserys later on have an altercation where Viserys is sitting on the throne. Daemon's like, oh, all you've done is wanting to send me away. And he's like, this is like an iconic moment. This is probably one of the clips that just goes around YouTube, because it's like 10 years I've waited for you to give me a seat on your small council and make me a part, maybe be Hand of the King. And he's like, why should I? And he's like, because I am your brother. And it's like, oh, the acting by Matt Damon is so good in this scene. If anything, you've just got to look up 10 years, because that's a great scene. And then Viserys tells him, go back to Runestone. Go back to the Vale, your wife. Just, you know, cool off, whatever. One of the other things that happens is Otto sends Alicent to go sit with the king, because it's like, oh, he's lost his wife, you've lost your mother, you know, you understand grief, you could help him. But then Otto's like, oh, why don't you wear one of your mother's dresses? Obviously, he has ulterior motives down the line. Another small thing is Viserys cuts his hand on the throne, his left hand. In later episodes, that's important. I'll get to it when we get to it. Here we go. We're getting there. It's such a long episode. So many things happen. It's just like beat after beat after beat after beat. So, after small council meeting, Viserys takes Rhaenyra down into the crypts where they keep all the like giant dragon heads, including what is it? Balerion? I think that's his name. Balerion the Black Dread. Huge dragon, biggest of its time, the oldest, came over from old Valyria, which was destroyed in the Doom. Anyway, they're standing in front of this huge dragon's head. They're having a conversation. Viserys is like, it's an illusion that we control the dragons. And he warns her about his dream. That, you know, if a Targaryen isn't on the Iron Throne, there's a long night coming, the longest. We will be doomed if not. And he's like, I'm going to name you as my heir. Yes, and then he shows her later on the dagger, Aegon the Conqueror's dagger, and in it, when you put it in the fire, it reveals the sort of prophecy, the prince that was promised, a song of ice and fire. If the Targaryen's not sitting on the throne when the long night comes, we're all doomed. And that's like a big moment. Whilst Daemon is fleeing on his dragon, and he's taken his whore, and they're leaving. And it's like, well, I don't think he's going back to his wife. So you've got Daemon's leaving. Rhaenyra is now the heir. She sort of, you know, gets to be heir. She is the Princess of Dragonstone now. So the heir gets to be named Princess of Dragonstone, and that is their sort of piece of land that they get to have whilst they wait to be the ruler. So yeah, Alicent is consoling the king. Otto is still hand. Daemon's left. Dolores gets to... Nope. He's worried about his land with the crab people. Emma's dead. Rhaenyra's heir. I think that's all the pieces lined up for episode 2, and it is not going to get any less complex. I think there's less sort of small bits. I think there's more complex sort of longer pieces. So hopefully it won't be just one big mess like this was. But I hope that some of it made sense. And if you have any questions, please ask me in the comments and I will try and answer any of them. I hope you enjoyed somewhat. And I hope to see you in the recap of episode 2 or in any other videos that may come out in the meantime. Okay, thanks.